our public attending, if you have comments, please put them in the chat. This is a working retreat and we're going to be working pretty much straight through. So if there are people that are out there, listening in, that's great. Put your comments in the chat and we'll deal with them at some point. I see there's one person. I'm not sure who it is.
Oh, that's Sarah. She had to call in. And
Okay.
I emailed all the attachments to everyone, so they should be in their email box if you'd like to open them up and follow along.
Okay, perfect.
It's called Retreat Documents. Okay.
Okay, so let's get going.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. The documents that Tori just referenced are just for your information as we go throughout this morning. I wanted you to have them. I thought we could upload them in chat, but apparently not. I'll explain what those are in a second. So thanks for having me. My name is Sarah Rock. I'm the principal of Rock Results, and I have kind of a long, complicated background, so I'll just give you like the 30-second, I hope, background because it might be helpful. I'm a child abuse and neglect attorney by training. After representing kids in that field, I moved into prevention work. I started several nonprofit organizations in the prevention space. I ended up at the state as the head of the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, and then did a few other things, including working at ACES Connection, and am now running my own consulting practice where I do an awful lot around trauma-informed practice, but specifically focusing on how to actually integrate that work into operations and taking it from the policy place to the practice place. So I've worked with Laura Porter a little bit, and I've worked with Montserrat Archila to create the series of webinars that I hope some of you got the chance to look at on self-healing communities, ACEs, and resilience practice. So that's who I am. I live in Davis. I have 3 adult children. Throughout my career, I've worked with mental health and behavioral health systems, including having very close family members in the system. So although I would not call myself a specialist by any stretch of the imagination, I'm familiar with a lot of the challenges, both at the program and the practice and policy level. So that's my background. Today, what we're going to be doing, and what I'd like to do now is I'm going to share my screen for a PowerPoint just to go over the agenda. And thank you all for being on video. I really appreciate it. Let me click over to that screen now if I can get you over there.
Sarah,
Tori, I can't share my,
Sarah, can I interrupt just 1 second? For those of you that haven't met her, I forwarded my link to Annabelle Nygaard, who is going to be appointed to the board, but she's here today. And so her name down there is Kathy, but she's really Annabelle.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, and congratulations on having a full board. That's a huge accomplishment, and gosh, so timely for these times that we face. So thank you, Kathy. And do, Kathy, when you need to interrupt me. Tori, I cannot share my screen. I have not. Okay. So did you let me share my screen, Tori?
Yes, your co-host. Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see if I can do that then. Very good. There we go. I've got 2 monitors, just so you know. So if you see me going back and forth, can you all see the first slide? Yay, thank you. And thumbs up is awesome. Thanks so much. You all know how to do it. Likewise, when you want to contribute, interrupt, please just raise your hand physically. As you know, it's a little tough to be facilitating and catch all the little raise hand signals and icons in the chat box. Becky, maybe you can help me do that and monitor that if I'm missing somebody who wants to, who I'm missing in their hand raising, and if they're in chat and want to interrupt. But I just asked folks so that we can facilitate a conversation without too much talking on top of each other, raise your hands and I'll just call you out and have you jump in if that's okay. So, all right. So today we're going to do a 3-hour session, a retreat on understanding or working with ACEs, trauma, and resilience. I'll come back to that in a second. And I did just introduce myself. This slide, and I can get you this deck just so you have this if you want it, has my LinkedIn information as well as my website for my practice if anybody wants to look me up afterwards. So about today, what we're going to be doing, I hope, is in a very concise 3-hour session, considering the principles of trauma-informed practice, ACEs, resiliency, adversity in general, and thinking about what you guys as a board want to do with that information. It's a vast set of information, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And the planning group that Kathy connected me to and I have had several conversations about what they felt would be useful and achievable in this 3-hour time frame. So let me go over with you just a little bit around the objectives here. Well, hold on a second. I got to find all right. So the objectives are to consider trauma-informed ACEs and resilience and determine your role as a board with respect to that area that a lot of us call ACEs science or near science. Near science is an acronym for neuroscience, epigenetics, ACEs, and resilience. So when we talk about one thing, we're really talking about a set of principles. And that's why it can bog entities down and make it complicated. You don't have to know it all and do it all. You just have to know where you are in that space. And we will be trying to, by the end of today, figure that out so that when you leave the retreat today, you have a statement of agreed upon principles or commitments of the board with respect to trauma, ACEs, and resilience. Okay? So any questions so far? And I just realized I'm not seeing the whole gallery either. Let me see if I can do that. And just jump in if I don't see your hand and your hand is raised. Okay. This isn't a topic you can cover in one retreat, in one 3-hour session. Most entities spend several years becoming fluent and fully integrating trauma-informed practice, but it's a great start, and you should actually have something that guides your work moving forward, and that's our goal. So Kathy and the team were very clear that this is more than a learning session about what ACEs are, because a lot of you already have a foundation in that and may have had access to that information in other venues. It's mostly going to be a conversation about what you want to do and how you can do it. So I am going to do a brief overview, however. So let's go over briefly of the agenda, or the program, I should say, for this morning. I'm going to give you a brief overview of trauma, adversity, and resilience. Then we're going to consider those as a board and how you might want to use those. We're going to have a break after that. And then we're going to come back and talk about what of those principles is really speaking to you, or is something you obviously know that you need to incorporate or utilize in your work, and we'll have a written record of that. And if there's time, we can start talking about next steps. I'm doubtful of that, but I wanted to agendize it, because if we don't agendize it, we can't really do it since you're a Brown Act group. So we have it in there. If we're lucky enough and you guys are super fast, we can start talking about how you might want to actualize some of those principles you're going to agree on. We're going to use Jamboard. I don't know how many of you have used that. I think, let's see, everybody has to have that link, Tori. So how would you recommend I get people to that link if we can't upload things in the chat?
Probably just to email it to me and then I'll send it right out to everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to do that right now. And bear with me, folks. We had a little glitch and having a major kind of technical error there. And there, all right. So I'm gonna send that to you, Tori. Test it and make sure you can get into it. We have a few minutes. We're not going to use that, and we're going to use that actually after the overview. So see if you can get into that, Tori, and let me know. I might just give everybody access. The good thing about Jamboard is it lets us sort of brainstorm and everybody put down their thoughts in writing, and then people can ditto each other's thoughts if they're the same, and we can then sort of move things around in groupings. You know, it's kind of like using Post-its in a live meeting. Okay, so that's the agenda. Any questions about the program and how we're going to work through it? Okay, great. And again, I'm a little bit disabled and I only see six of you in my gallery view. So my brilliant idea to have you raise hands is not going to work. So just call out if you want to talk. All right, so let me, first of all, I want to talk to you about the, yes.
Sorry, it's Becky. I did
go Becky.
I got the Jamboard link into the chat.
Thank you, Becky. Very good. All right. So everybody should be able to just click on that and open it, and you type in it directly now that you have the link. And at some point, you know, we'll figure that out. Tori is available to help you figure that out if you can't get into it. Okay. All right. So to facilitate today's conversation, I had a concern that all of you might be at different places in your knowledge of ACEs and resilient science. So, and also the principles. So what I want to do now is I want to share another document, which you were emailed just at the start of this meeting. And that is the principles of the facts of ACEs and resilience. So if you want to open that, I'm also going to be looking at it here on the screen. So let me close this screen and share another. There are just too many screens. All right. So can everybody see facts about ACEs document? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. All right. Sweet. All right. So facts about ACEs. Many organizations spend months just dealing with terminology. And let me enlarge that so it's a little bit better for everybody. Don't get hung up on terminology, but it is important that folks understand ACEs are just one kind of trauma. And there's two uses for the term ACEs, really. One of them is based on the study that Rob Anda and Vince Felitti did at CDC in 1998. People call that the ACE study. And the other is a more generic, non-capitalized term, adverse childhood experiences, which includes many other adversities other than the 10 that Anda and Felitti studied. Okay, so keep that in mind.
Sarah, this is Carol.
Go.
The page that I can see is the Principles of Trauma-Informed Practice. And I did print out the 3 pages. So I think.
Okay. Let me change it.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So hold on. Sorry. Okay. I wanted to do it on the bigger monitor, but that's not going to work. So now we're here. Principles of Trauma-Informed Practice. Can you see those, Carol?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry, thanks for pointing that out, Carol, appreciate it. So different ways to use, I'm sorry, it's not principles, now I'm all messed up here, it's facts about ACEs. So do you see facts about ACEs? Thank you, all right. So just keep in mind that ACEs, when you hear it, can either refer to the 10 that Anda and Felitti did, or more broadly, adverse childhood experiences, because since 1998, a lot of people have studied other ones and have demonstrated correlations between other kinds of adversity and bad health outcomes. So I thought it would be helpful for you guys, though, when we're talking about ACEs in Sonoma and a lot of the data that's out there, it refers to data that comes from the state, which are generally the 10 that Rob Anda and Felitti used. So in Sonoma, you can see that you've got 40.9% of Sonoman have 1 to 3 ACEs, and 21.6 have 4 or more. And the percentage of Sonomans who have 6 or more ACEs is higher than the state average. So the story of ACEs in Sonoma is not very different than most of the states. However, what's important to note is that there are pockets in Sonoma, as you guys are probably well aware, where the ACEs scores are much higher. So I've been talking to some of the health clinics and health folks like West County, and a lot of people don't feel like that data that I just gave you is really reflective. So be aware that it may be worse than these numbers reflect, but it's probably not very different than most of the states. So what that means is if you have multiple ACEs, your risk of bad health outcomes go up. If you have certain kinds of ACEs, there can be a synergistic combination that makes the impact even worse. And even though every ACE has 1 point supposedly in this scoring system, how they're combined makes a difference, as well as how long a kid experiences them, right? The frequency and dosage. So keep all of that in mind. My favorite example is I worked a lot with kids who were sexually abused, and a child who's sexually abused but may have no other ACEs. So it looks like they only have a 1 ACE, which would put them at very low risk of bad health outcomes, is clearly at risk of some really bad stuff, and particularly behavioral, socioeconomic, things like that, mental health. So you have to keep all of that in mind when you look at the score. So some of the other things you want to think about are on this sheet, but ACEs, I think one of my favorite is sort of mid-page there. The attributable to ACEs are these conditions. 69% of all mental illness is related to ACEs, and that's just the 10 ACEs that we studied. 69%, right? That's high. 78% of IV drug use, 61% of incarcerated adults, 54% opioid use, 25% job injury or illness. And these things go on and on. So there's a great graphic that I can share with folks after if anybody's interested, that Becky and Carol both know well, which we call the oil slick graphic. And it shows how the massive percentage of some of our most difficult problems, a lot related to mental health, are as a result of what children experience from 0 to 18. So there's some other facts on there that I thought you might want to know. Kids with parents with ACEs, so not just kids with ACEs, but before kids get ACEs, kids are 6.3 times more likely to experience household substance abuse, 10.4 more likely to experience homelessness, and so on. So a point of great importance is that transmission of ACEs. If we can prevent parents who have ACEs from transmitting those to their children, that's a smart policy point to intervene, okay? So keep that in mind. We can prevent ACEs in a lot of different ways. ACEs are also passed on, they believe, although this research is new, via epigenetics. I'm not even going to go into that from a science perspective because I'm not smart enough, but it has to do with the expression of genes. They believe that chronic trauma, toxic stress, certain conditions actually turn certain parts of the genes on and off, and that those are passed on to children who are then at much higher risk of those same issues. So if a parent has a mental health problem with a serious history of ACEs, there's a connection between what that parent how they may impact their children, which you knew anyway, but there's science, physical science behind that as well. Okay, so something else to think about is that transmission of ACEs. Let's see. One of the other things I really want you to keep in mind about ACEs is that it affects your executive function. So it helps us reframe how we think about people, that it may not be what you did, but more like what happened to you. But it also changes, perhaps, certainly with high ACEs, chronic or toxic stress, how your brain functions. Things as simple as keeping appointments, being on time, following directions. So that's people who don't even know they have ACEs. So if you have clients and other folks that you're working with, or people in the community that you care about, and you just can't figure out why they're not showing up on time because you know they really want to get into this treatment program, you got to remember their brain may not be wired to do that well. So even though you don't have to know who's been impacted and exactly how, I think the science of ACEs helps us in that we stop and think about how people might have been impacted by ACEs. How might their ability to have executive function, which is such a vast range, be impacted? You know, how might they be triggered? So it just sort of opens up this whole new world for us to think about what might have happened to these people, and what should we keep in mind when we're writing policy, weighing in on funding strategies and that kind of thing, and how do we help others keep that in mind? And then, of course, on top of that, there may be behavioral health issues, right, including mental health. That may be part of the ACEs story, or may be a secondary or tertiary, right, issue. So keep all of that in mind. And then finally, I want to just say a word about resilience. And there's lots of different definitions of resilience. You probably have your own favorite one. My favorite one is actually that people are resilient if they're able to access the resources they need in their community to take care of themselves and their family. So it's based on a concept of people taking care of each other and communities meeting the needs of each other. And that concept comes from a guy named Mark Unger in Canada at the Resilience Center. But I like it because it grounds us in the concept that we're not resilient alone, we're resilient in context, whatever that context is. Okay, so that's my brief overview on ACEs. The science of resilience is pretty new. They don't really know exactly what works for people. You know, they have some information, some stuff that people believe makes a big difference to sort of help buffer the impact of toxic stress. You guys might have seen the Surgeon General. Everybody in the Newsom administration loves this new term playbook. So they have the stress playbook out, and that's how to manage stress to avoid it becoming toxic. So that you can disrupt chronic stress. Everybody has it. You all know that. Adversity is a part of life and can be and frankly is critical to healthy development. But when there's too much of it and you don't have the resources you need to deal with that, whether those are personal or physical resources, then it can cause damage. And even then, however, we can heal. We know the brain is elastic and they're learning things more and more. And I suspect a few of you are doctors out there, nurses, health providers, about how elastic our brain is and how resilient people are and how we can learn it. Okay, so that's just a very brief high-level overview. You guys may already know more than that. I focused on things that I hope are of sort of potentially big picture things that relate to your work as a board, but you may have other things. So, all right, so those are the facts. Any questions about facts or comments? I want to stop now and ask you. Okay, all good, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, Carol, there's one thought I was thinking about. I'm not sure what triggered it, but in medicine, they talk about universal precautions, and I'm thinking perhaps with ACEs and trauma-informed care, universal accommodations, or whenever you meet any person in any circumstance, kind of keeping that in mind that. We don't know what what's happened to somebody in their life.
Great. And I think, and that's a great point. And again, I'm a practitioner. I'm not a clinician, of course, but I translate policy to practice. And I think one of the failings out there is that we make things too complicated. And in this world, if everybody could just stop when they're working with patients, clients, residents, and think, what happened to this person? What do I need to keep in mind? What kind of conversation should I have? That would dramatically change how we interact and do our work, right? Just that simple question. So anyway, keep that in mind. And you're right, Carol, that universal sort of, and we don't know where people come from, and we don't need to know exactly. The more acute things become, the more information we need, right? But some of even the most basic interactions with people, like I'm thinking, I work with Burbank Housing on becoming trauma informed, and it could be things like a resident comes in to apply for an application. They're not there for mental health services or even social services. They just need to do their application. If Burbank is aware that they may have experienced trauma or have something in their life experience that makes filling out an application difficult, then Burbank can respond in an appropriate way without shaming those people or making it unnecessarily difficult, right? So super easy, doesn't cost anything. You know, it's based on what people learn. So great. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. I want to try sharing another screen. So let me see. Oh, let's see if I can get this one going. Oh, do you see principles?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. Because I can take my glasses off then. The other screen is too small. Oh, pretty funny. All right. So the other thing you hear about are principles of trauma-informed practice, for example. Again, lots of different terms. There's principles of trauma-informed approach or a trauma-informed approach. There's an ACEs science approach. And I'm going to talk to you specifically about trauma-informed practice because that works for ACEs as well, because as I said, ACEs is a subset. These top 6 principles, you probably look familiar to you. They're based on the recovery model out of SAMHSA. And they kind of have become the gold standard for trauma-informed practice. They put out a brief and articulated this. Now, thing to keep in mind with these is they're based on the recovery model for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So when you're applying that to your work, just keep that in mind. But they work for most areas of service. But what I tell everybody is that they should take these and make them your own. So when I'm working with housing, for example, is, you know, they apply slightly differently. And you'll want to, when you look at these principles, think about that. Of course, you're a mental health board, so it's a pretty good fit. I'm going to come back to those in a second. Also articulated by SAMHSA were what they call the 4 R's. That you realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand potential paths for recovery. You recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma. You respond as an organization by fully integrating this knowledge to resist, and here's the 4th R, re-traumatization. I add to that, it's more than resisting re-traumatization, in my opinion. If you're trauma-informed, if you're practicing a set of principles that you adopt, you're also, as an organization, realizing and recognizing and responding and preventing people being re-traumatized. But you're also just being more compassionate and more effective if you're able to practice these principles. So going back to the SAMHSA principles of trauma-informed practice, this is all from the organizational level, although in organizations, it starts with the individual, your own individual awareness of your own experience, your understanding as attendees of trauma and so on. But these principles are geared at the organizational level, that everybody on the board understands trauma and stress and the impact to some extent, that there is safety and predictability for patients, clients, participants, attendees in the work that you do it with compassion and dependability, empowerment, you do it in an empowered and collaborative way. You do it with culture of humility and equity and seeking equity. And I think most folks would really expand that to being anti-racist. And you build resilience and social emotional learning. So what SAMHSA found and validated is that if you pursue these principles, you are going to more effectively help victims of trauma recover and not just function, but actually heal. So every organization can look at these and apply them to the depth and extent of the work that you do. So entities like a hospital can do trauma-informed care. Mental health clinicians and clinics can provide trauma-informed care, where they're actually moving into treatment and healing using these principles. An entity like Burbank Housing can practice these principles to certainly avoid re-traumatization, but also just do better work for people because they don't know who's experienced trauma. They don't know what kind of pain and challenges people are carrying around. And if they do adopt these principles in a way that suits what they do, people are going to do better. There's tons of different outcomes. And I didn't put that on here, so I'll just throw out a few. The kinds of outcomes that come from trauma-informed organization include, and top of my mind, are much greater rates of engagement of patients and residents and clients, whoever your constituents are. Sustained participation, more collaborative work together, truly collaborative, because there's more trust, which comes from transparency, partly, among other things. There is much greater, typically, job satisfaction and job retention in organizations that are trauma-informed, because they're not only more fulfilled working with difficult problems in the community, but their own internal practices are more conducive to their own health as well. So those are just a few. There's tons of outcomes, okay? So those are the standard trauma-informed ones. There's a lot more to say about trauma-informed principles, but I'm going to stop there. I want to make a comment about the ACE score. Let me enlarge that. Okay, it's not letting me do that. All right, so the ACE score is not it's not an individual assessment. It's a general population tool. It's a conversation starter. It's not the be all end all, and it needs to be, you've got to keep in mind that that's what it is. There's a big push right now to use it in a very simplistic way. And it's been shown that if it's not used correctly, it can actually re-traumatize people quite a bit and be harmful, right? So we have to be really thoughtful about how we use it. But it's a brilliant conversation starter. It's a brilliant way to get organizations to orient to prevention work and what happened to people. But it has to be delivered in context to build a relationship, perhaps, with the person administering the ACEs screen, which in the state of California right now is PEARLS, or in the ACEs little mini survey that's out there. All of it is a way to just get conversations going, but there's almost a therapeutic way to do it. And we need to be careful. When people start out doing this, I'm not sure if ACEs Connection is still doing it. I worked for a while for ACEs Connection, and they would ask the whole audience what their ACE score was. So in an audience full of people, people would be scoring 8 on an ACEs score, and realizing that they might be passing all of that on their children. And, you know, it's just unnecessarily painful, and it triggered people. And so be thoughtful when we use the ACE score information or the tool. So keep that in mind, okay? All right, principles of self-healing resilient communities. I don't know how many of you got a chance to watch Laura Porter's videos, the series of 3. Raise your hands, tell me if you were able to, or, okay. Good. Lot in there. And we're not going to really talk about that too much today, but I want you to think about what you saw and what captured you personally, and and in an emotional way and an intellectual way that you want to incorporate today in this conversation, okay? But I tried to capture the principles of self-healing communities because I think they're beautiful. I've done a lot of community development work, and most of it doesn't work because it doesn't take into account the impact of people's histories and adversity and where they might be coming from. So these principles apply. We could do it statewide. We could do it. We're trying to do it in Sonoma County right now. You could do it in your mental health space. They can work in any kind of ecosystem, but it's the idea that you in program planning, making funding decisions, developing policy, anything that affects communities or a population, and let's say it's in your case, families and folks with mental health issues, you want to think about the root causes. You don't want to talk around it. You don't want to work downstream. Self-healing says if we really want to prevent things from happening and help people get better, we need to look at the root causes and develop a system that allows us to do that. And also that allows us to reduce the transmission of things like, as I mentioned to you before, of ACEs. You want to invest in learning circles or learning systems, because if you don't have a system to learn where you develop an idea, test it, see how it works, and then respond, you're maintaining the status quo, right? And we tie up billions of dollars in social services in the state of California, most of which, frankly, are not effective. And that's because they're maintaining status quo practices, approaches, and mental models. So the self-healing community model says, you know, figure out what works for whom, in what context, and then work with those folks or on that problem to facilitate continuous improvement. And the only way you can really do that is doing it with the residents, right? So it's not to say there aren't different levels of work. There are boards that make policy decisions and funding decisions, but the more we can work with communities to make their own decisions and at least to learn with them, the better we are going to be at creating solutions that are a right fit. What Laura Porter calls right fit, right work. I don't know if you guys picked up on that in the videos, but what that means is we're providing a lot of things. And I think this has really happened in the mental health, behavioral health space. We do what we think is good for people, right? Or what one particular group thought was good for people. And it's well-intended and it's based on science, but that doesn't mean it is working. And it doesn't mean it's working for everybody. And so being able to turn that power, that conversation over to people to let them tell you, this is what we need. And I know that's very much what the board is about in your charter and everything. So I think the self-healing community model, if you want to get into that more, learn a little bit more about how that works, might be of interest to you, because it's more than input. It's way more than input. It's learning from people and empowering them to make their own decisions, and then changing our systems to make those solutions possible. So there's some other features of self-healing community model here that you can see, you know, focusing on the dynamics that sustain the problems and going after that. And a really great point to keep in mind is that we have developed what we call systems immunity in our social services and our and our healthcare services, I think a lot, our community-based systems, where, like Laura points this out, we a long time ago turned over our obligation to, as community members, to take care of each other and as communities to the government. And then the government contracts with CBOs. So we now have a system of government and CBOs that have this whole vicious cycle, really, of funding and having those things maybe not work so well. But it's very hard to change those because they've been in place so long. And I don't know about you, but I've been personally in the middle of several conversations to try to really change things. And it was a very strong response to we can't change it because that's how we've always done it. And so self-healing, if we really get into the community and do this well, residents can help us challenge the status quo, how we've been doing things, and help us develop new solutions. So we all need to be there, right? Experts and policymakers and funders and people and consumers, or whatever terminology folks like to use. But it's also about, it's not just a government problem. It's not just a CBO provider problem. You know, it's the community's problem, and the community should solve it. So I'm going to stop talking at you. Go.
Oh, Carol's hand was up.
Go, Carol.
Yeah, I think that this is really connecting with me around the Mental Health Services Act, CPP, or Community Program Planning process. I think the MSHA or Prop 63 intention really was to try and bring consumer voice into decision making. And I think the real challenge is that, well, one of the challenges is, you know, funding for the infrastructure and the time that it takes to include the community voice. I think a lot of the administrators are on tight budgets and very tight time frames for getting reports out, like the 3-year plan, or you know, their budget to the Board of Supervisors. And unless we can create a system of a network of opportunities for people to give input, it's not going to happen. And so I would, for one, very much like to see the CPP process not only exist within MSHA funded programs, but across the mental health service provision. And I would very much like to see community input, and not just input, because I think, you know, we're surveyed and asked what we want, but that loop back doesn't happen. So looking at the community-based participatory research models, you know, dialogue, appreciative inquiry, you know, the techniques are there, but they won't happen unless there's a conscious effort, perhaps on our part as a mental health board, that when we look at proposals, that we look for that element. Has the community been asked? Is this a program that they want? Anyway, so yeah, that just kind of was an aha moment for me.
Great. I made a note of it. Tori's taking notes as well. And we're going to open the Jamboard in a second, Carol, so we can, I want to capture people's thoughts. And the whole issue of how to engage community is a big one that's worthy of, I don't know, an awful lot of time and effort. But I think you hit the nail on the head that the systems we have developed to supposedly get that are not working. They seem to be inefficient, right? And people are tokenized, and it's only input. And if they're giving input within a system that's not working, then that's not going to do much. So there is an effort in Sonoma, and I'll leave you with this to think about and work through at your leisure. But we're trying to build a self-healing community. And that means incorporate these principles that Laura outlines and that she demonstrated in Washington over at least a 15-year period, and change the way we do things. And the more we do that, the easier it'll be, because these are domino effect systems, right? We have to sort of disentangle the systems, bring in new ways to do it. And it has to go far beyond what we've done before. You know, I've worked a lot in child welfare, and child welfare has been trying to engage child welfare parents for decades, and it's never good. And they're always, and everybody's frustrated, right? Everybody's frustrated, and I'm sure you guys are too. So good point, Carol, and you may want to make a note of that in the Jamboard, and we'll come back to it. So anybody else have any comments before we do move into the Jamboard and let you go to town on that, and I'll tell you what to do.
I do have a question. You were saying we. Can you define we? Who are you working with? to be
Oh,
that way?
so good question. So St. Joe's Community Investment has taken a lead. They kind of really love self-healing model, the self-healing model. And I was working on that in Napa. I started with the support of COPE Family Center, the Resilient Napa effort. And that was organized around the self-healing community model. So they decided to go another direction because they wanted to move into human-centered design as a way to engage folks. Self-healing uses human-centered design, but goes far beyond that. So to answer your question, Kathy, I think Dan Sherman at St. Joe's has been leading this, but there are other people. Ellen Bauer, when Ellen was at the county health department, they brought in Laura Porter years ago to train a bunch of folks on self-healing. Then when Sherman and Montserrat Archila brought me into Sonoma, what we wanted to do, and I talked to Laura Porter about this, a lot of people were trained, but it didn't go very far in Sonoma. Something happened. So that's why we're looking at what needs to happen to really actually start doing it. And so St. Joe's I've been working with Montserrat in a group called Connection, Capacity, and Change. And Becky, that's how I met Becky and Carol and a bunch of other folks. But we brought Laura in right before in October 17, right? And we trained folks on self-healing community model. And then literally a month later, the fires started. So go ahead, Michael.
I wasn't
Please.
trying to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I was waiting.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, we brought Laura in. Laura trains people. The fire came. We started it back up again. COVID hit, kind of thing. I don't know. I can't remember the sequence of events, but we've been hanging on and are happy. St. Joe's wants to bring Laura Porter back into the community to use her in strategic ways to help us move forward. And one last thought, Michael, is that we just submitted a big grant to the Surgeon General's office to build a network of care in Sonoma County. I've talked to a few of you about that. We find out, I hope Monday, if we get that, we will be integrating self-healing community model throughout a network of care that relies on, technology, a resource and referral platform with RCHC and some others. So Ellen Bauer would be leading the community engagement piece. If we get funded to do that, I think I would be the network coordinator, we would come to you guys and say, hey, what do you want to do? If you're interested in doing self-healing community model type work at whatever you want to do with it, but we could coordinate. So that's the we. So, Michael.
Yeah, this is kind of going off of what Carol was saying and then what you said in reply, but I've found and feel that there's, I don't know if you agree with this, but there's a general accessibility and PR problem when it comes to the world of mental health and getting to the communities, where it seems like what you're asking is for this huge investment from them when they aren't really going to be understanding at a base level of what that's going to look like for them. And then also kind of an issue being, it sounds like the approach is going to where they are and trying to find them and trying to connect to them rather than going to where they already are, which is on social media. And that kind of seems like an issue of like, there's not a great, how to say this, like, there's not like, oh, I'm on Instagram and there's that one Instagram account I follow and it kind of talks about ACEs or kind of Sonoma County mental health, stuff like that. So that in my mind would make it easier to go to them, and it's also a low commitment to them of just like, hey, follow along here and stuff like that. That is something I'm kind of interested in because I have a background in social media management and stuff like that.
Great.
So I don't know if that can be part of the further conversation.
And the answer is yes. So, and Carol, I saw your hand. I'll call you in a second there. The answer is yes. And the answer is you go to the community the way they want you to go to them, right? We don't dictate that. So before COVID, people didn't go to people enough, obviously. They expect people to come to their meetings, right? And we're paid to be at the meetings, but participants may not be. And you guys are probably not paid to be on your board now. I don't know the conditions, but it's just much more effective to go where people are. And we know that we can find them more, there's more safety, there's more openness, there's more respect. And certainly social media, even before COVID isolated folks, was another avenue for people to do that. And I think particularly mental health. And it's really interesting. I was always kind of skeptical of the telehealth, right? Like the telepsychiatry. And I'm thinking, what? So poor people have to have a video, but I can walk into my provider's office and have an in-person session. But it's been good, right? I mean, the reality is the access rates have gone way up. The engagement rates are good. It has a great benefit. Now, it's not going to work for everybody. So another thing Laura talks about that you might have picked up on in the videos is layering strategies. So one of the things we do, and it goes back to your point, Carol, about how systems, they come out and they require you to do things like this, you know, A to B, and is that we kind of challenge that thinking and say, I'm not going to just do one strategy to reach my people and my input, MHSA, California. I'm going to use a combination of strategies and layer them because that's what people want, right? So layering strategies, whether it's input, engagement stuff, let's call it engagement, service, delivery, it all has to be layered because single solutions just don't work. We know that they don't work, right? These are complex problems. So doing things, and yet because they're driven by bureaucracy around, that's also very much driven by a fiscal timeline and a budget cycle, they tend to be single solutions and they don't work. So what we want to do is kind of think about, and that's why communities can say, hey, you know, sure, I love this, but it falls short because they didn't offer it long enough or there weren't enough hours. So then that gives us something to go back and challenge the funders and say, hey, how about we do this? Like, I was a founding commissioner for First Five in Yolo County, and when I didn't know anything about fund giving at all, I was really new, this was 20 years ago, and the grants were 3 years. I'm like, what can you do in 3 years? You spend a year ramping up, a year maybe rolling, and a year ramping down. So you need at least 5 years. And I think most First Fives in the state now use the 5-year model. Still not perfect, and they're very bureaucratic, but going to a 5-year was a major change for a funding cycle like theirs. So anyway, it's an example. But Carol, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a reminder that Petaluma also had been looking at the resilience model through the Petaluma Healthcare District and CHIPA, or Community Health Initiative in the Petaluma area.
Yeah, Carol, the training we did with Laura Porter through St. Joe's, through CCC, Connection, Capacity, and Change, had all 5 health districts represented, including CHIPA. So all the health actions were there, different clinics. I was talking to RCHC yesterday about all the clinics. So I think because there's a coalition of those and RCHC's here, that makes it really easy to potentially develop systems or change those communication systems. You know, it's an existing network that we could probably use and change for good. All right, good. Any other quick questions before we go to this Jamboard? I know I'm behind time, but this is good, so we'll just keep going. All right, is that all right? Okay, so what I want to share with you now is the Jamboard. So you guys go to that. First, I got to open it. Sorry, I got to open it on my screen. Oh, by the way, folks, in the Jamboard, yay, I see all of you in there. There is on slide 8 or page 8 a parking lot. So anything that comes up, you can put it in the chat or you can dump it there as it comes up and it doesn't fit in any of these. So I'm going to share my screen. So you're going to see what you do. Where's my, this it? All right, do you see what principles or features in trauma? Do you see that screen?
No.
Okay, hang on. Don't know where it went. Is there anybody who cannot get into the Jamboard?
I can see it, but if I move my cursor, it doesn't do anything. I'm
So
not
I'll
sure.
tell you how to use this. Okay,
Yeah.
can people all see what principles or features of trauma? Can you see the Jamboard? All right. So the way, it's super simple, really, I like it a lot because it's a way that you could get ahead of me. You don't have to wait for me. You can do your own thinking, and yet we capture it. You don't have to identify yourself. It can be anonymous. I'm not going to look at anybody's name. The only way we're going to, it's probably in there someplace, but we're only going to, only if you want to say, hey, my comment was this. I'm not paying attention to who posts what. So the way you use it is you simply click over here on sticky note, and you could post something by, so if you click on it and then hit save, that comes up to the board. You see that? And you can see how I cannot touch.
I think you have to give us access.
Yeah,
'cause we
we're
only
on,
have view.
All right.
we're on view only right now.
Okay.
I don't have that little sidebar thing for the choices.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not get link. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give everybody can view editor. Let's hope this works. Copy link. Let me try uploading it in chat myself again. Let's see if we can do that more. I'm trying to do it. Otherwise, I'm going to send it to you, Becky, and have you upload it in chat. Yeah, it's still not letting me. Well, wait, here, let me try that. Okay, try this, guys. I just posted it in chat. See that? Try that link now and tell me if you can all get in there and move around.
When I did that before, it threw me off the meeting. My computer.
Oh, that worked for me.
It worked for me.
Great.
Yep, I'm
If you
in.
get thrown off, whoever said that, you probably need to open another browser and maybe put that in there. I don't know what the situation is, but okay, very good. So, and other folks keep trying, and also chat Tori, and Tori can walk you through now how to access that. Okay. So everything, all of our work. Oh, nice. Somebody learned how to use that. I haven't done that yet, the drawing. So you can use anything you want. I was just walking you through it. The little square to your left, I hope everybody can see now, is a Post-it. You can post things. I like Post-its because I can drag them and drop them and organize thoughts. And I think I can do that with your text boxes as well. But we just all will brainstorm, and I'm going to tell you what to do in a second. And you can use a Post-it to do that. Okay. Oh, nice. Very, very sophisticated. That little guy there. The other thing is a text box. So you see the letter T in the text box down here where I've highlighted it. And you click on that, you click again on the screen and then drag. And that's a text box that you can type in if you want to type. The thing about that is it's very hard to size. So I recommend Post-its because the more you type in there, the smaller the writing will be, and you can get everything in there. So I recommend Post-its, but I did just want to give you that, give you the option of text if you like, okay? So what I want you to do now is, you got a long overview from me. I'm sorry it took so long, but now we have a foundation. And I want you to think about, of the trauma-informed principles, and you have that document in front of your own computer, think about what principles are relevant to your work as a board. What do you care about? What jumps out at you? And again, we're not trying to capture everything and do a strategic plan for this right now. It's what are the main things that you think you kind of must incorporate or really want to, and put it in a Post-it. And then we're going to talk about what you guys come up with. Questions? And you can cut and paste from that Word document that Tori sent you and that I went over with you on the screen. You could make your own up. Do not worry about getting the language just right. You can keep just whatever your concept of it is, please. That's the most important thing. Okay, we're going to take 10 minutes, to maybe a little bit less, depending on how fast it's going, but let's take 7 minutes or so to do this. And I'm here. I'm just stopping my video for a second. When you run out of room, you all, or if you just want to start, I mean, I don't know what you can go to page 2 and post on page 2. We won't all see it, we won't see it on the shared screen, but it'll be there. Mhm. Very good. Love that. Mm-hmm. Got you, Becky, putting in those pictures.
Yeah, I'm a visual person.
I love it. Love it. right. How are we feeling? Or can we kind of start talking about this? Do people need more time? Who would like more time? We're okay. All right. Because again, not getting everything today, but we're getting going. So we want to have enough down to be able to do that. So what I would like to do now, with folks' permission, is probably ask some clarifying questions, me of you and you of each other, if somebody had a question about one of the post-its, because I know we're writing in shorthand. Okay, the first question I have to ask is, what's CPP?
Community program planning, and it's a part of the MSHA requirements. I
Okay.
translate it to lots of other CPPs, but I think the correct one is community planning process. But I think it is collaborative, participatory planning or whatever, but it is community program planning.
Yes. Community program.
You know, while we're talking about MHSA, I do want to throw out there too that, these innovation grants are supposedly designed to shake things up and do things differently. And I was talking to somebody at the state board about this, and I think they would welcome something like a self-healing community model type effort, an effort to revise how we engage people, something new other than the usual way we do it. So just throwing that out there to you, that I don't know where you guys are in the funding cycle and stuff at the county. I can't keep up with it all, but if there is one coming up, keep that in mind. I think that would be a really smart investment on part of the state too. So, okay. So lots around how that you want to engage with people. Does anybody want to share their post-it with the group and explain it a little bit more, so that we understand, or so that you can make your point? Does anybody want to do that?
Yeah,
Carol.
I think the big thing to be aware of is that the MSHA legislation requires community input. The problem with the legislation is that they allow the county to choose the amount of zero. The allocation is 0 to 5%, but if you have a budget that's really struggling, by definition, you're going to choose zero, and Sonoma County is not the only one. So I think the exciting thing is that our MSHA steering committee has moved forward with a work group that is looking at the CPP process. So that is an exciting development. But again, the challenge is, how do you fit that in? How do you build it out in a system that really is tied up in red tape as far as timelines and staff time allocation and budgets. And I think we have to look at this in the long term, that changing that takes you have to move a lot of things around to make space for that to happen. But yeah, time is money, and staff time is money. So I think that really is the biggest obstacle.
Okay, good. I wanted to I'm taking notes of sort of key points of areas of possible action or decision on you guys' part. I'll get you just a second, Kathy. So Carol, remind me, I can't close the screen and do that because I want to keep this up to our conversation, but make sure I have that in our notes when we get to the end. Kathy, and then Michael, I saw your hand.
Yeah, this is just a comment on Carol's, and I have been on the board for a way long time. And this is, except for when the MHSA originally started, this is the first time in a long time that there actually has been action going with the community planning process. And we are lucky actually as a board that both Carol and I are on that committee. And I think that the last few meetings that we've had, I have really appreciated Carol's input and the other consumers on that committee. And I think that there is movement in a positive direction, but nothing changes overnight. So there's a couple of stickies that I put on that were also related to that. And
Okay.
I'm really pleased with the direction that the county is going. And I think that I'm just appreciating Carol's advocacy there.
Great. And then the posted here, I'm sorry, Michael, I know you should go, but there should be a uniform policy for all of the providers. So would whoever made that post-it explain, does that mean a policy of engagement and policy of trauma, use of trauma informed? What's that comment about?
Okay, so it's me, Kathy, and
Okay.
I don't have huge experience, but my daughter has been bouncing around the system for 20 years, and so I've had contact with a variety of different providers, and in some places, the places where she is happy, these principles seem to be in effect.
Neat.
But the principles that you're talking about, like
Okay.
I don't have them in front of me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are other places within the county system, but mostly with contract agencies where the principles I do not feel are being applied. And so I think that somehow that has to happen, that there's more of a uniform application of these principles to all of the programs that touch our clients. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. So what I'm doing, and you guys may disagree with this later, but I think that is, when we're thinking about how we're applying this, what is the role of the board in helping set standards of whatever kind for mental health services, right? So they may be direct services, facilities, whatever. What's your role in doing that? That's an area we'll come back to. Great. Anybody else? Michael, please, Michael.
I've had this thought for a while with the board in general, and I don't know the exact way we would go about doing this, but it would be really nice to see at our meetings to be hearing from actual patients who are going through what the system that Sonoma County is offering, so we get better insight into the quality and care that they're receiving. I know we can't necessarily go directly to patients, but perhaps talking to the social workers Sonoma County, and they can inform their patients that we're looking for that.
Michael, do you have a post-it on that?
I do. It would be nice to bring in patients with assumed ACEs where possible. Yeah.
And, and that goes right to that principle of ask the people, right? What do they want? How's it working? The incredible challenge with mental health, and I know this from firsthand experience, and I had access to all kinds of resources, and I had an issue with my brother, and it was insane because of the confidentiality, right? So I understand that, but it creates special challenges both in accessing residents, whatever you want to call them, folks, and for their knowledge and experience, and also in helping people too. So I think that you have some special challenges as a mental health board in getting to that kind of access we're all talking about, right? Which is finding out what people have experienced. But the role of, it gets right to that principle also of the learning circles. So one idea might be creating a learning circle. You could set up or promote somehow facilities or service centers, whatever venue makes the most sense, where people hold their own learning circle and then communicate to you as a board about their thoughts. So you don't talk to them one by one, they talk to each other. You as a board support, I'm making this up right now because I don't know what exactly there is in Sonoma. Let's say, I know there's some psych hospitals. Let's say there's a psych hospital and you have groups in the psych hospital, and the groups are facilitated for this purpose, to look at the question of, hey, how do you like your care? Is it what you need? What didn't work? And I think, of course, we know a lot from mental health folks that what doesn't work from their families and the individuals. We already know that, but we aren't necessarily able to change it. So there's a combination of needing to ask them, setting up systems that are methodical to keep that data coming in, to keep connected to that experience as a policy board so that you can always be attuned to it. So it's not a one-off, it's a process that's built into your work. If the network of care goes through, that can be a very large process. If it doesn't, you guys as a board could create a little mini process or a mini system of engagement of consumers in different ways, right? But it's not a one-off. You're not doing it just once. You're not doing it for the MHSA plan. You're doing it because you want to empower those folks to reflect on their experience and share that and tell you what works and what doesn't work. So that's a great point, Michael. Other people on the Post-it.
Can I comment on Michael's just really quickly?
Please, of course, of course.
So I get the difficulty with confidentiality is big. And so having the peer reports that Kate does and sometimes Sean is helpful that way. But the other spot that we have that we're trying to build in that I encourage everybody to support, Bob Hale couldn't be here today, but he has worked very hard on putting together the site visit protocols that we really haven't used yet. But within those site visits is consumer voice and consumer interview. So I really encourage everybody to participate in that. And especially Michael, if you have a certain group that you think needs a voice, maybe that's a visit that you could participate in.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, done.
Okay, so from that, so far, and I want to capture these. So we talked about what is the role of the board in setting standards for trauma-informed practice in the mental health space in Sonoma County. I mean, just very simplistically. And the other is, can the board create some kind of a system to engage and support mental health consumers, maybe families, maybe not, in ongoing learning circles. And by learning circle, I mean all that entails. It goes far beyond input. It's tell us what works, what doesn't work. Other things may come up. Those principles, they may share that the principles of trauma-informed practice are not being implemented, whatever. All kinds of good things will come from that. Okay, anybody else? Somebody said more about human-centered design. Do you want me, was that you wanted to do more of it, or you wanted me to share a little bit more about that? I think it's gone now. Happy to talk about it.
Hi, this is Patricia Gray. I'm having a little trouble getting back to the Zoom screen, but I think you can you hear me?
Yes, Patricia, hi.
Okay, great. I posted the Engage Residents as a vital resource, and as I was thinking as you were speaking about, so the whole idea about this is how we always do it, and we can't talk to the residents, so we get because for all the obvious reasons, but we can do that on site visits. Of course, we plan that part of it, but it's always so staged in a particular way, and it's always kind of awkward, I think, because we have to ask their caregivers to solicit them for us, and then we don't know what goes on. And although I completely trust their judgment, but it's still kind of awkward and sometimes feels like we may not be getting the whole picture. But it occurs to me that there is a different way of doing that. We could use our ever expanding peer counselor groups who could meet with them, who could meet with residents, and in these and hold learning circles. And we could, as a board, institute learning circles as part of the evaluation process, so that we can hear from a speaker that comes from the learning circle with permission to share what they're learning about the level of care that's being provided. It's just an idea.
Great. I captured that. I'm going to put it next to the creating a system to engage and support, because you're already problem solving. And I loved your point about, the stage stuff just doesn't work, and it doesn't work for so many reasons. And part of that is because people always put their best foot forward too. And depending on the facility and how hard it is, I used to work in a child psychiatric hospital. That's how I got into all this work, frankly. Just found fantastic experience. And most of the children were there because they had almost near-death abuse from their parents. And they needed full-time care. And I would watch the cycles of when people came to visit, right? Not just the parents, but it might have been the teacher. And then occasionally there'd be outsiders. And it's really hard on people with acute conditions too, to have people roaming through the facilities. And I mean, it depends, but again, applying the principles of where do people come from? How are they going to participate? Is this welcome? Is it not? I'm not saying people don't want to engage. They do, very much so. But I love your idea of using the peers and stuff. That's great. So good. All right. I should go back to the main screen. And Carol, yes.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion from Patricia. I think one of the challenges is that most of the folks, the peers that have been trained as peer support specialists, are currently employed in the peer centers with West County Services. And any additional work that we want the peers to do, we need to find funding for, because West County has been very careful to protect the hours of the peers to address the obviously the RFP and the funding that they, the specific requirements and that they have to fulfill. Why I say that is I've been involved with the Advanced Care Directives with Susan Keller, and while and even with the Sonoma County Peer Council, one of the challenges is how do you find the funding to cover those hours? Because I think one of the challenges is also around the trusted helper. The trusted helper may not be someone from outside of their agency. If you're trying to get input from people living in a supportive living environment, say, the person who is their direct caregiver may well get a better, more truthful, honest answer than an outside peer. So looking at who the trusted helper is, who the trusted leader is in that community, maybe faith-based communities, or ELACs at school, or it may be community health workers that are working with communities around COVID, or any number of other things, may have a better relationship to get a more truthful answer.
Carol, I don't mean to cut you off, because this is a very important topic. Couple things, we're coming up to the break, but also we're moving into problem solving. So I want to keep it kind of high level. So we made a note that peers could potentially be an asset to you guys. And I know you're a real expert on those, Carol. And of course, there's the whole new Medi-Cal billable stuff around peers that's coming. So that could open everything up. So so what I want to do is we've got 2 minutes left to clarify these questions. Did anybody want me to clarify the human-centered design issue?
Yes, that was from me, Patricia.
Okay.
I would just like to hear more about that.
You bet. Okay, so human-centered design, it's a very jargony thing these days, but in essence, it's just really good program design, in my opinion, which is you start with the impact on the person. So it's not driven by your budget. It's not driven by, it's all done with the human at the center. So everything in a reflection of a practice or program needs to be, what's the impact of this on the person? So in human-centered design, there's some techniques that you can be trained to do that I've been trained to do, for example, and there are a couple other people in Sonoma now too, like Monse Archila, where you can use these methods to do this sort of rapid brainstorming, make some decisions. Then you test what you come up with together, and then you come back and modify it. So it comes from the design world, but in essence, it's just good program planning, and you're going to hear about it more. It's a technique. It's not a framework or methodology. So, okay. And anybody else? Yes. Anybody else? Okay. So we are almost at the break. What I'll do, we're going to take if you don't mind, let's take a 15-minute break. Kathy, is that, I budgeted the time for that. We can do it shorter if you want, but let's make 15, and then I'm going to work with what you posted. May not do too much with it, but what I want to kind of start doing is articulating in the second half of this chat what you're going to commit to. And what I've already heard is that you're going to commit, it sounds like to me, some kind of consumer, resident, whatever we're calling folks, engagement process that is different than what has been happening, for example. So there are a couple themes have jumped out, and I can capture those as a starting point, but it's also going to be sort of what you guys want to do and commit to up front because you think is particularly important, okay? So we'll come back. I'm going to turn off, I'll be working here. If anybody wants to talk to me offline, just speak up, or I can send you my text. And otherwise, I'll see you back at 10:45 on your Zoom, okay? Sound good? All right. Okay. Go get tea or whatever. Okay. See ya, Becky, for doing that. Tons of great stuff on the Jamboard. I'm going to open that back up in a minute. Looks like everybody's back, right, Tori? 13, I wasn't sure of the number, but let's start, and to honor keeping to the schedule. What I want to do is make sure we get to something that you can walk away with and utilize moving forward. That could be as simple as a decision to everybody get training. I'm making that up. Or it could be a commitment to developing a new way to engage residents and kind of hit on a lot of the things that you brought up. So that's our goal in the next part of this conversation, okay? So I did just want to share that with you guys. And before I jump back to Jamboard, did anybody have anything they needed to say to me or to the group that's going to affect how we're going to continue this conversation? All right, and keep in mind, and I'm sorry, Carol, that I had to interrupt last time. On the strategies that you adopt and want to invest in, you will flesh those out and discuss them at length in the future in your meetings, I am sure. So what we want to do here is make a note of those strategies and make sure we capture the ones that occur to people, strategies, principles, ideas, whatever you want to call them, so that you can follow them up down the road. So don't feel like you have to know everything today. It's kind of hard not to, because there's so much that you've already shared so many thoughts. So yeah. All right. So let me share my screen with you again. There we go. I just like that it's so colorful and nice. So can everybody see the Jamboard? Okay, Great, thank you. And you may see me look to the left. What I'm doing is looking at pictures of you guys because your lovely faces are blocking my colorful Jamboard. So if you see me look away from the camera, I'm actually looking at you. So what I started to do here, just to let you know, is make buckets. And I wanted to start making sense of what you're already sharing. And I haven't finished this because we ran out of time, but I want to give you a sense of where it's going. It also raised some questions for me I wanted to ask you briefly before we move into a more detailed discussion. So some of the buckets that I'm seeing are that one of the things you see yourself doing in this space is setting standards. Okay, let me run through these quickly and then we can come back. And by that, I mean standards for the county and their work, standards for providers and how they deliver mental health services, standards for yourself as a board, maybe standards for the community. Okay, and I'm using the word standards broadly. You also seem to be thinking about what kind of an oversight role you can play. I mean, you are the mental health board, and I use the word asset-based oversight because in self-healing and in the trauma-informed world, it's critical to be evaluating how we're doing the work, but it's not shame-based. It's not supposed to make people feel threatened. It's about, you know, what is the future we imagine for ourselves, and are we doing what we want to get there, kind of thing. And if not, let's fix it. So it's an asset-based oversight role. You have the most input so far, and that also makes sense, around engaging residents. So I'm going to continue to drag things over there and I'll move them around eventually so you can see them. But you have a lot of thoughts about your role as a board in engaging people and how you can do that. And then how that also can help the community at a larger level beyond just mental health. You want to plan better. You want to use this science of trauma and ACEs and resilience and compassion to somehow plan better or impact current existing planning processes. That's kind of changing those mental models and existing systems that we talk about in self-healing communities. Hey, quick question. Becky, tell me, can you see your gallery photos in this Jamboard? You can? Yeah. So you see I just thought you could. So let me move that a little bit out of the way. I can't stand to look over here to the left at you, so I moved it. You also have some values in here in your values discussion, and you started to talk about equity. You value lived experience, right? You want to value and respect community strength. So values, you articulating your values in a trauma-informed way, or what are your values vis-a-vis trauma-informed ACEs and resilience practice? You're going to want to consider that. My guess is a lot of yours pretty much are, but you also, so there was a post-it here. Okay, so those are the big buckets that I've come up with so far. Does anybody else see or have thought of already a big bucket that I have not created yet? Okay, shout it out if you have it. You can interrupt. You don't even have to raise your hand. I give you permission because I don't want to miss it. And again, I'm going to finish this up after this session and give it to you. But I had a couple quick questions. Take care of the caregivers. In these buckets, where would you see that? Is that a standard that you want to articulate that you make sure people are doing? Is it a value? I wasn't sure where to put that. Any thought? Okay, no worries. I'm going to leave it here. Community connections. I thought community connections actually applied kind of to all these buckets, right? That looking at your role and making community connections or facilitating those can be a better way to plan, a better way to engage, a better way to oversee, right? And look at oversight. So I think that's a very cool overarching one. Community-based participatory research. I'm assuming that is that engagement or planning? Where would we put, and whoever put CBPR?
It's both. It's
Okay, I'm going to put it in the middle, Carol. Cool.
I guess it's a tool, so it can be used in any of the buckets.
Okay, good. So you know what? Great. Let me create that. I like your bucket. I'm going to call it tools. So tools can be strategies or whatever, but all right. So you're getting the feel. We don't have to do all these now. We might go back and do them later, or you might want to do them, finish these on your own. But many of these are going to be in, in the engagement bucket. I don't think there's a bucket that I missed so far, but it may occur to us in the next part of this conversation. All right. So go ahead. Any other comments on this board?
Yeah, mine was take care of the caregivers, and I think that you hit it kind of on the head, where it's not shame-based, that we're working together to solve the problem. And a lot of times, caregivers are a little bit nervous about oversight.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, your point there. For some reason, I lost a picture of all of you. Let me fix it. Because I think they have a special role. And again, because of the world of mental health, how we work with folks, there are just other things to think about, right? It's like if you were going to be engaging highly traumatized people or chronically homeless folks or whatever, there's always a set of common experiences that we need to keep in mind or learn about before we make assumptions, right? You need to know who you're talking about, and we shouldn't make assumptions that people are going to trust us or anything. So, all right, good. Can everybody, let me get out of this. Sorry, don't know what's going on with my screen. Hang on. All right. So now what I want to do is, can everybody still see my screen?
No.
The Jamboard? Huh?
No.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Huh. Okay, Tori, are you there?
Yes,
So
I'm
what
here.
happened is,
Yeah, I can still
Okay.
see it, but I think, I'm not sure why. I can still see it.
okay, let me figure something out here. I'm not getting let me end this. I'm
Try it
getting
again.
yeah.
I
did
made you a
host-
host again.
Yep. Thank you. I think if that's great. Let me try it again. Host disabled sharing. Still can't get it. Well, am I a host? Sorry?
Yes, ma'am. You are the
I am a
co-host.
host.
I'll make you the host now.
All right, let's try that because I'm not able to share. Otherwise, I'm going to have somebody else. Maybe I could get you, Becky, to help me drive this if I can't get people to share it. It's still saying I'm disabled.
I can still see it. I could share, because I think mine's open on my
right.
other computer. I could share it.
I think
Okay,
it's
that'd be
you're
great.
using the phone number. So I think you're using a phone line, right?
Yeah, you can't do it. Well, I'm using a phone line, but I am also, okay, so, but Tori, you're on the, I show that I'm connected, so I just can't figure out why it won't let me, but I don't know how to move from the phone number unless I hang up and,
Do you want me to try and share my screen? Because I can still see it.
yeah, the problem is that you can't, you cannot, okay, and I'll type on mine. Yeah, let's try that, Carol, see if that works. Do you mind?
Yeah. Okay, I can just do it and then undo it if it's not going to work.
Okay.
Sarah, will you go up to my name and click on it and make me the host again, please?
Yep.
And then I'll make sure you're the co-host,
Yeah.
because now the recording option has gone away for me.
Wow, it won't let me make you the, host.
Technology.
Oh.
Awesome.
Okay, so can people see that now, my screen yet? Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Tori, stay on, please, so that, oh, but you're not a host, so hang on. Sorry, folks, I might have to hang up and call back in, and so, but I want, no.
No, but it's
Okay.
coming.
It's coming. I think you're delayed, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, guys.
You are screen sharing.
Okay, good. So you should be able to see that Jamboard now. Tell me when.
We're on the Sarah Rock has started sharing screen thing.
Okay.
Oh, there it was.
And I'm
There we go.
There it is.
all right. Sorry, guys. Who knows what's going on out there in the cyber world? But I will keep typing if you lose the visual, I'll keep typing or we'll reconnect. So, or I'll ask Carol to take it over. So I apologize. So we have these great, did I lose you again? All right, is everybody there?
We just
Okay,
lost
I
screen
have it.
sharing.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to have to ask somebody. I don't know what's going on. Hold on one second. So Tori, stay in the call. I'm going to get out of the meeting and come back in. So guys, I'll be right back.
Thank you.
Sarah, you are sharing your screen now.
All right, good. Thank you. Sorry, guys. I got you. Facilitator's worst nightmare, I'm just going to say. So you're also calm and patient. Thanks very much. Hope it doesn't happen again. I'm on a hotspot Wi-Fi, so I don't know why it's happening at all. But let's continue. So you have these buckets. We didn't come up with another one, except Carol, I think tools is not a bad one. Because tools are maybe a strategy, for example. So they're good things to know and just remember. So what I want to talk about now is let's go to the next Jamboard page and talk about what of the trauma-informed principles that we've talked about today and we've looked at so far are ones that you want to commit to. What we want to leave here at 12 o'clock with in an hour is, and so we're going to take this sort of shortcut, super direct path to this conversation. Which of the principles of trauma-informed practice and self-healing communities are, did I just lose everybody?
The screen, yeah. It might
Okay.
it might not like that you're using two monitors.
Yeah. Okay. And so you know what? I'm going to turn this over, if I could, to somebody else. So Carol, does that work for you to share your screen and share the Jamboard?
And try. Yep.
Thank you. And then what we'll do is I'll just, you may see me, I'm going to turn my video off to minimize disruption. And you'll hear me talking, and then Carol, can you type too, Carol, or should I, or does somebody else want to? Huh?
Just tell me what to do and I'll try. But I think I will need to be made co-host to be able to share my screen.
You are co-host
Okay,
now,
do you
Carol.
mind?
Okay, I'll try now.
And then what I should be able to do, actually, Carol, is I'm going to be typing in the Google document because I own it, or the Jamboard, right? So I can type, I think, because you're all looking at your screen. So for example, right now I'm creating a new Post-it. Can people see this blue Post-it that I just created?
I think you are actually sharing your own screen, Sarah. And if I share mine, it's going to lock you out. I think
Okay,
you're back.
the problem is it keeps turning on and off. Let's go with this and keep our fingers crossed. I just don't want to keep falling on and off because it's disruptive to you guys. So let's move forward and keep our fingers crossed. So Carol, thank you for being willing. We'll just forge ahead. And frankly, what we might do is I will listen and type and then reflect it back to you guys at the end of the day. So doing it in real time where you see it is less important than the conversation. So what you're going to do now is think about which of the principles of trauma-informed practice and self-healing matter the most to you and that you want to dig into now. And don't think about yet, and you can, if it comes into your head about it's a specifically applied, like I want, like you took from your last Jam board, I want to articulate the standards that all mental health service providers should be using around trauma-informed practice. Go ahead and say that. If it's higher level, which is we need to engage, we need to create a peer engagement, an engagement process with the community to get better input. I want you on this page, this point in the conversation, what do you want to do to commit to implement around trauma-informed practice of your principles? So which of these principles matter the most to you, and could you articulate maybe to the world after today, or whenever you ratify it, that this is what you're going to do around trauma-informed practice? Okay. So I'll type and create these. Let's, or you may also do it yourself, feel free. But does somebody want to start?
So
I'll help you out a little bit.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is Patricia. I have something I'd like to say.
Go, Patricia.
When we're talking about involved, I got a sticky note right in the middle of my screen. I can't make, okay, I cancel it, then it'll go away. Or is that your sticky note? Oh, that's yours.
Was
Okay.
mine.
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry
Oh,
about that.
okay. Yeah, that's okay. So identified trusted leaders. It occurs to me as I'm the executive director and a co-provider of at an adult care facility in Napa that is a re-entry program for persons with mental health challenges leaving jail or prison. And it's scheduled to open in a few months. We were supposed to open in December, but COVID and everything else got in our way. We are fully funded by Napa Mental Health because we're the only game in town in terms of this population. But what I notice when I go to these meetings is that I am the only care provider there. But because I'm on the board in Sonoma, and I'm not on the board, of course, in Napa. I'm a care provider there, and but I noticed that there are no care providers. And I also noticed in the years that I've sat in mental health, I see care providers there, but I don't see them being necessarily addressed as leaders. It occurs to me, and it occurs to me that in the last conversation, people were talking about how do we expand this, trauma-based practice to the care providers and having them get that they're supported in the community? Because I think there's an element of being isolated as a care provider now that I are one, and but I'm empowered by the knowledge and I understand how it works, and I don't have any problem stepping into the meeting with all of this extraordinary talent, from the judges who are presiding over the mental health courts to the undersheriff and the probation officers. And I'm working together with all of them, creating a broad-based support for Greyhaven in Napa. And it occurred to me while I was sitting here listening that I do feel when I'm in those meetings, like I don't have a voice, and which is not really what anybody who knows me would be. I mean, everybody who knows me would be surprised, but I don't feel like I have a voice when I'm listening to all the policymakers in these big Zoom meetings where I can see all of their titles and I know who everybody is. And I'm a retired Superior Court judge. I'm not new to any of these arenas, and I think it's why I feel comfortable there. But I don't think all care providers would feel that they had a voice there, given how.
Great.
So I would like to commit to creating work groups or support learning circles for care providers. The executive, the executive level, or who is it? Where does the buck stop? And who manages the training of their staff in each one of our care provider programs.
Okay, got it. Good. Thank you so much, Patricia.
You're welcome.
All really important points. And then, so I'm going to put commitments in pink that are articulated as such. And I also captured sort of what you were saying, because I'm not sure it's a commitment, but where you might want to go. But how do we expand trauma-informed practice to care providers and support them to have a voice in the process? So that's something when you design your engagement process is a goal you might want to adopt for that. Other people, commitments that you want to commit to.
Sarah, I just wanted to, if there's a way to, you know, second what Patricia said as a care provider myself, you know, to star it somehow that I would be on Patricia's bandwagon.
You'd think I could do that very simply, but I'm just going to duplicate it and put them side by side so they don't take up much room. I don't know how to add my little emoticon, so
I'll do it.
We'll
if
figure
you
that
want.
out later. You do it, Becky, please, because you're good at that. All right, great.
Well, I want to
Kathy?
add to that I support that too, and I actually think that I want to put that idea under use peers to support learning circles, because it depends on, you know, peers doesn't mean consumers to me. Peers means, like, I'm a teacher, and when I'm with other teachers in a staff meeting, I'm with my peers, and those care providers, when they are with other care providers, they're with peers. So I think there's a distinction between consumers and the word peers.
Yeah, very much so. Peers are going to be a big thing for you guys, I can see. So we've got 2 in addition to Patricia's, and I added the caveat to use peers in those learning circles. But what I heard too, Kathy, is it sounds to me like you guys are committing to learning circles. So let me ask if that, and Carol, I see your hand. Is there anybody, is that a correct statement? Is there a commitment to using learning circles? And these are details over here. You're going to use them to work with care providers. You're going to maybe involve peers in that process. Is there a commitment to using learning circles? Okay, I'm not here. Michael says yes. Anybody else? Carol?
Yes.
Okay.
Patricia.
Okay, so I'm going to, Becky, can you put 2 on commit to learning circles for now, and we'll revisit that because I may have put words in y'all's mouths. Sherry, please.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Perfectly.
Okay, good. I never know about that microphone thing. Anyway, I totally support this as well. And I think because we've been using peers to define consumers for so long, we might need to just kind of make some kind of notation that when we're using peers in this context, we mean all, because as a family member, I can see that's an important learning circle too.
Great. Becky, and so Becky, can you add a star to use peers for me on behalf of Sherry?
Of course.
Carol.
Yeah, I think I just want us to change the language of use peers because peers feel used.
Yes, I hear you.
I think what we're doing is
we're engaging maybe?
We would like to create learning circles with shared lived experience. So if that is the shared lived experience is that you are a provider, then the lived experience is that you are a provider. If you're a family member, then the shared experience would be that you're a family member. I think not that it precludes other people joining your learning circles, but I think if we expand the notion of peer, and why that's important is the peer legislation, the SB 803 does include multiple layers of peerness, not just lived experience, but family members, veterans, TAY, LGBTQ. It doesn't just mean that you have a diagnosis and that you, so shared lived experience and with, I like with is better than use.
I got you. Thank you, Carol, for that. Other commitments?
I don't know how to phrase it exactly at this time, but using TI principles in board communication with county behavioral health, county board of supervisors, ensuring that, you know, when one says they're trauma informed, that they are actually then responding and not re-traumatizing. So making sure that the 4 R's are being covered. Because, you know, you can be informed about a lot of things, but that doesn't mean you're actually doing them.
So Becky, let me ask you, why are you limiting it to communication with county? Would you want TI principles to be in all of your communication with people, with each other, with the community? Or do you really want to call this out? And is there a need to call it out with the county?
I mean, I agree with you. I feel like it is all encompassing in communication, but I'm calling it out specifically to the county. Just in my short, you know, not quite a year, tenure, I've seen limited participation from the county, minus maybe one individual, and there's an obligation there for more specifically Board of Supervisor communication and attention.
Okay, great. And of
Yeah,
course,
and
as you flesh your work out in this area, you may say, yeah, let's just put this in everything. But I love that you have recognized this particular need and called it out. Very specific is good.
I want to support Becky calling that out, because I think that if you go back several years, that we had, I think that the board and the county had a somewhat difficult financial moment that we're still recovering from, and it's easy to say things that make them defensive, and it's easy to feel defensive in that communication. So I think it's really important to use it on all levels.
Okay.
But
I'll add that.
Yeah, specifically be careful to use it when you're talking to other people that may be.
Okay, and you know, the timing of that is up to you. You may start with the county and then enlarge it or not, but I made a note of that, Kathy, so thank you. And, you know, I want to mention what I think is a really important point. Whoever added the note about the BOS, the Board of Soups, that they, to ensure the BOS is well informed about ACEs and trauma-informed practice. So that's really important. Is there a commitment to do something about that, to either make sure that that's a role that you play or that you actively plan to go after? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think
Bob,
ahead,
Kathy,
Bob.
actually, Bob raised, yeah, go Bob.
Okay, that was my post. I feel we're an advisory board to the Board of Supervisors, so we have a responsibility to keep them informed, and this is an important issue. I feel that it is one of the commitments we should hold.
Great. I'm going to recreate it in pink, Bob, so and shorten it, but I'm going to move your comment to it. That's great. And, you know, you guys could be, I'm all excited about how you could do this, so forgive me if I'm butting in, but, you know, what a great role for you, because a lot of people see ACEs and trauma as a mental health issue when we know it's kind of a whole person, whole world issue. But with your credibility as mental health folks, people who have expertise around it, either lived experience or whatever, or providing it, I think your suggestions to the BOS would be very seriously considered, that you have a lot of weight and could have a lot of impact there. Great. We can come back and talk later about how to do that. Sherry, and then you, Carol.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Bob. I just think that that's really important. It crosses the ACEs and trauma-informed care crosses over everything the Board of Supervisors is involved with as well, not just mental health, but particularly mental health. And I think that it's really important for us because that is our role. It's our number one role from the California Association of Local Board. I keep saying that, but that's our job. And I think it's important. Thank you.
Other people that I may not be able to see, I was just asking for some help. I may be missing people because I'm not seeing everybody's face. Does anybody else have a commitment? And just shout it out if I don't see you.
This is Betsy.
Hey, Betsy.
Hey. I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. I'd like to see if we can, and this could be a huge undertaking for us, but I'd really like to see institution leaders to have some level of training around TIC, because they are essentially, leading those that are working directly with our communities. And so I feel like it needs to start top down, but while also working with our community. Yeah. So
Great. And so of those, oops, I made a typo. And of those organizational leaders, Betsy, can you tell me, do you mean both political providers? Who do you mean by that, I should say?
anyone who's
Okay.
working with community should be informed.
Great. I like that. And, I think something to think about is you guys can decide what it is you want to tell people. So you don't have to make yourself the experts on all things trauma. We've got a lot of great organizations like Hannah and others who know a lot about it. But I think you can be the voice for the mental health community, the providers, the consumers, the family, whatever, and lead the charge on that. And I think if we educate folks from our perspective about what's important to us in our space, that's going back to a self-healing community principle of taking our expertise and moving in our spheres of influence, right? So it doesn't have to be everything. It can be your very clearly defined sphere of influence of mental health, however you define that. And you commit to doing that. You commit to your commitments within the scope of it. And that's one of the things Laura Porter talks about, which is, move in your sphere of influence, and then eventually these spheres start to connect, right? So if you guys are the mental health experts and really are saturating and layering strategies around trauma-informed practice in the mental health world of Sonoma County, that's going to bump up against how we provide early childhood care or, the juvenile justice system, whatever, right? It's going to bump into other systems, especially mental health. So keep that in mind. You can be your sphere of influence and then connect those spheres to create this very powerful network of action. Other commitments.
Carol, go ahead.
Go, Sherry.
Oh, sure.
I was just going to say the role of the board in setting the standards for trauma-informed care and mental health services. Going back to what Kathy introduced a while back, there's, it just seems like each of the programs that our clients are in should have the same standards of how they operate and what they expect of clients. And
Great.
I think we should have some more, specific continuity in there.
I love that. I love it because, and I've got some things out of order here. I'm just going to start a second layer of our commitments in pink because these guys all go together. Because it's easy, honestly. The power of the word and committing to things can be just so much easier than you think. So that could go like this, that you come out with 10 standards that you expect every provider in the county, you would like to see, because you have no authority, of course, that you recommend all providers pursue and implement. And the way that works is you're practicing trauma-informed principles that way, because you're leaving it up to the individuals, in this case, providers, to decide what's a fit and what isn't a fit, what works and what doesn't work. But you're highly recommending it. Right. And then that can drive a conversation, right, Sherry, around how can we help them get there? Because hopefully that's what'll happen. Right. And then you as a board can say, well, maybe you need funding to do that. And so that's a great thing to do, because you could bang those standards out in one meeting, right? Or, I mean, you might have a series of learning circles to do it. That would be maybe the ideal. So
to do that.
But my point is, it's not a program that you have to design and implement. It's language.
Right.
Love it. Love it. You know, I heard just what I saw from your work on the last Jam board was you were very specific about, and maybe Learning Circles covers this, about engaging the community to learn from them what's working, what's not working. Is your commitment to Learning Circles, to including people with lived experience, does that capture that? Is that enough? Or do you have is there another commitment there about how, what your work is going to be around engaging communities? Carol.
This is. I'd love to see the mental health board be the source of inspiration for building strong networks. I know they exist, and there are multiple networks, but you know, for us specifically from the mental health board to really identify, you know, who we want to build bridges with, and to identify existing learning circles, so that we don't have to create learning circles necessarily. Maybe technical support or facilitators if that's needed, but I think like NBOP has an extensive infrastructure. Community Action Partnership has an extensive network and trained individuals who can do that kind of work. But, you know, so I'm thinking for mental health board, it might be board of supervisors, clinics, jail, hospital, family members, peers, community-based organizations. And I think of that very visually,
So I've got the board inspires building strong networks, and that part of that is using the learning circle model, using folks in making sure you're including people with lived experience. Is that, and we've got a couple of people that I can't draw stars like Becky, but little, you know, people who are people, I didn't practice ahead of time, Becky, what can I say? People who have reinforced that point. So does that capture it, Carol, close enough for now? That your mental health board will inspire building strong networks.
Yes. Okay. And I think it goes with the identifying existing trusted helpers, that we will not necessarily be seen as a trusted helper, and people will not necessarily share comfortably with us, but they will share with the person that they know, you know, their minister, their teacher, their, you know, personal caregiver.
Perfect. That's absolutely right. That they're, you know, that's the other thing. It's so disrespectful to think you can just walk up to a stranger and ask them about their most deepest, darkest feelings. And yet we do it all, not darkest, but deepest feelings. We do it all the time to clients, and we do it over and over and over sometimes, right? Like, and you know, the ACEs screen in itself, I'm just going to say, the 10 questionnaire is, you know, did you ever experience sexual abuse, physical abuse? You know, it's quite invasive. So that's why you want to deliver the ACES screen in a trusted environment. Just what you said, Carol. So it's 11:30. Oh, go ahead, Sherry. Go ahead.
I'm looking at board set standards and I'm thinking maybe it should say board encourages set standards or board, I don't know. I think that's too directive. I think we more soften it.
Yeah, recommendations maybe.
Yeah.
How about the
Okay,
board? How about the board adopts as opposed to sets? Because that insinuates that there's been some collaboration about what the standards are with the board and care givers and or the caregivers and our board and with consumers and with peers.
Except that we're an advisory board, so we can't tell, we can't adopt it. We can encourage.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the board of supervisors. So the board of supervisors, you said.
No,
Oh, you're talking about.
Let me clarify. I'll
board.
clarify here, guys.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So, I would say, how about this? Articulate standards, right? Because your guidance, you're there to say, hey, here we all are. We're committed to this issue. We're the semi-experts. This is our purpose, let's say. And this is what we think is important to employ in the work that we're doing and that you're doing. And they can take it or leave it, right? Or the funders can pick it up and incorporate it or not. But it's guidance, advisory, because, the reality is you don't just advise the BOS, you are in a position to influence far beyond the BOS and throughout the community, and people look to you to do that. So just articulate, are people comfortable with that word?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, good.
And Sarah, this is Betsy.
Who's
Can you hear
talking?
me?
Yeah,
This is
go.
Betsy. And I don't know if this applies here, but I'm really interested in ensuring that when we are working with our community, with peers, that we are setting the culture of belonging, that we're setting the culture of healing. And I'm not too sure if that will apply here or...
Betsy, I'm thinking that's one of the standards, perhaps. Is that correct? That you want to capture that? Okay.
Yeah. How about best practices as opposed to standards? Because I think standards, from the work that I'm doing right now, are legal standards or requirements.
Okay, good point. I'm going to let you guys think about that. You could say, what was the word you used, Carol? Not standards, but?
Best practices.
Okay, we got to be careful about practices because best practice is a term of art. It implies a best practice that has been tested and adopted as such. So you could say articulate, all right, let me think about that. I'll put in best practice too for you, but I think you want to be careful of that because I think there's a lot of terrific trauma-informed work that is not yet a best practice. And so if you limit yourself to best practice, I'll put that there. Just something to think about down the road, okay?
All right. Could we say evidence-based practices as opposed to best practices?
That also is, as you know, a term of art, and that a lot of this stuff isn't evidence-based yet. There's a real rigor to that, and I don't know. So you may very well say, we're not going to articulate anything that hasn't been validated or has been demonstrated to be a best practice. I think that's a super powerful role for you, but it's more than what I was talking about, which was, or I heard people talking about, which is, you can, when you go back to the office or your next meeting or whenever you follow up on this conversation, you should flesh this out. What is it we want to say to people? What is it we want them to do? And it's not, and then you can work backwards to figure out what it is, what you call it. If your role is
principles.
Principles, there you go. Very good, that works. What do you think, guys? Are we okay? I'm going to put principles. I'm going to leave best practice in there as a reminder that you might want to talk about this some more, but that's great. Thanks, Carol. Okay, so we've got, oh, Bob, I'm going to call on you and then we're going to transition to wrap up on this. Go.
Real quick, I think you sort of closed that. However, I would be concerned if we eliminate the potential for innovative
Agreed.
practices.
Absolutely. Self-healing. It's got to be innovative because if you want to change things, things are going to be new. They won't be tested yet. So there's another word that we use in the evidence-based world called emerging practices, which is the word you kind of give to everything that looks promising. Well, there's also promising practices, right? But that's where the innovation comes from. So your principles may be that you are going to encourage the adoption of validated trauma-informed principles out of SAMHSA, but also acknowledge and recognize those the Sonoma community is creating, right? So it's a conversation that you'll want to flesh out some more. So we've got like 15, let's see, do we have any community members here today, Kathy, or are you getting chat from community members we need to leave time for you to address at the end?
There's nothing in the chat.
Okay, so that gives us 15 more minutes. If we need it. So, let me rehash or review the commitments that you feel sort of inspired or ready to make, and you may decide, and let's have a discussion about those. Okay, I want to make sure everybody feels good about it. If you do not want to commit to that as a board, then you just say that you want to wait. You don't need to say anything else right now. And I'll move it to the side, and I'm going to move some of these guys over because what I want to try to do is pull out sort of the consensus pieces that everybody's cool with. So that's a hard set of principles you're committing to. But I also don't want to pressure people before you're ready if you really don't want to. When you think about what you're committing to, the commitment today is only that you are going to go back to the board and figure out what in each of these commitments you are going to do and how you're going to do it. So you may, in reflection, say, I'm making this up, right, guys? Well, we are committed to the learning circles, but we're going to put it on hold this year because we don't have A, B, and C. We're going to look at it in our 2022 planning. Okay, that's okay, and you can table that. But right now, what I want to do is discuss these, see if people say, I'm not ready to commit to that. You can say not ready or wait, whatever language you want. And what I want to leave with is some pink Post-its that are things you commit to moving forward on in next steps. And then we'll have 15 minutes to start talking about those maybe. Does that work for folks? Okay, so let's start with support learning circles for care providers on trauma-informed practice. Support them to have a voice. Let's start with you commit to the learning circle concept and using that in your work moving forward in some way. Okay, I'm not hearing any wait. Yay, okay.
I'm
Go ahead.
I'm going to say that I really liked what Carol said, that I would say that personally, I feel like commit to supporting learning circles. I don't think that we necessarily commit to running them. So that language is a little weird to me.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, I think the learning circles, while the initial idea was for service providers, I think the learning circles apply to any group that gets together with some similar background or interest. So,
okay.
Keeping it at a higher level.
I really think that we need the care providers to see that we're actually talking about them. I think they deserve as much attention as any of the other groups. And so I think it's really important that we give them a voice in particular. and because I really feel like it's a huge missing. So if we get too far into the weeds with how we define it, then let's just be clear that we suggest the learning circles. This is something new, and so I think we need to be very specific in some ways.
I hear you, Patricia. You do not want to lose that focus, that recognition, the importance, the previous neglect of caregivers, right? And so I think that is, if you're thinking about planning, what you're committing to is supporting the concept of learning circles, and that you will be there when you actually map this out and how you're going to do it, to make sure that includes those people, as will other people make sure that people are included. Okay, so you can flesh that out, but can people commit to supporting learning circles? And I'm not saying how you're going to support it. It could just be policy, could be funding, it could be making it a funding priority, whatever you do. Then you can flesh out later what subpopulations you want to make sure you're reaching with that method. The method of gauging people is learning circles. Sherry, you've had your hand up a while. Go.
Yeah, I support that. And that's a piece, I think, going back to what Carol said and what I got from the meeting I attended virtually yesterday on the COM board training on the community planning process, or whatever that CPP is. It's an important piece, and I think it's an important piece for us as a board, and I think it should be inclusive to all stakeholders, but I definitely hear what Patricia's saying about the providers.
Okay, I'm going to make a little note. Don't forget providers. Just to capture your point, Patricia, but there are other groups as well that I guarantee you have not been reached that need to be reached, and you'll be adding those as you flesh out your role with respect to the learning circle. Great. Okay. So another principle that I hear is that you're going to let's see, where's that? You're going to keep the BOS informed about trauma-informed work, ACEs, resiliency. You don't have to say today what that is, just that you see that as your role, that you can be the champion of trauma, ACEs, resilience, and make sure your BOS knows what they need to know to support your work, to support the work of the board, as well as to support mental health in Sonoma County. Do people commit? Does anybody want to wait on this commitment?
No, it's important.
Right on. Right on. That's a good one. Again, you'll define to what extent you have the capacity to do this and how. It could be as simple as, I don't know what your, report out mechanism is, but let's say Kathy attends the BOS meetings every month or twice a month, and then she would be there with her trauma-informed hat on, mental health, waiting to weigh in. That could be it. But by saying you're committing to it, you are more likely to do it. Excellent. Okay. The other one is using trauma-informed principles in board communication, especially with the county. And there's a thought to also use it at all levels, but a particular need to use it with the county. That ties in nicely with with the BOS one we just talked about, right? It's a form of communication. So is there anybody who wants to wait on this commitment? Great. Super. You guys are rocking and rolling here. Okay, let's see. So these are actually over here. So we've got these existing, these are caveats, using trusting relationships. That's all part of the learning circle. Carol, is the board is going to inspire strong networks. That seems to me to be almost a standalone commitment that needs to be called out, or is that your umbrella for your learning circles? Talk to me a little bit about that, where you think that fits in our commitments.
I think the learning circles, for me, when I see it as a picture, I see the learning circles as literally circles, but I see the mental health board in the middle with lines to those circles. So how
Okay,
are we going
got
to build those communication networks? So it like one that is working and that we are already doing is the jail work group. So actually putting time and effort into building those communication channels, and that could be a work group, it could be a policy, it could be any number of strategies, but to consciously look at how that information is transferred between the circle of the learning circle and the mental health board. And so it could be a quarterly follow-up, it could be a survey, it could be a set of questions that we send out as a starting point for facilitation. It could be leveraging existing connections.
Perfect. So Carol, what I did is I just added a note to that post-it are you guys ready to commit to building communication channels between circles? So you're committing to talking to people differently. You're going to use your learning circles when you figure out what that looks like. But it goes beyond that. You want to make sure they're connected to build this strong network. Is there anybody who doesn't want to commit to that? And we're talking about exploring that, thinking about that, nothing else. It may be doing it, but right now it's, do you commit that that is an important principle to build a self-healing, trauma-informed community? Great, okay. Another one, we've got 14 minutes left. Make sure organizational leaders should have training around trauma-informed practice. So maybe the commitment is encourage, support, recommend. Do you guys want to make a commitment about your role vis-a-vis promoting I would say, specific mental health application of trauma-informed practices to organizational leaders across Sonoma?
Yeah, I don't think we can commit to doing the trainings ourselves, but we could certainly make people aware of upcoming trainings, like Hannah Institute or the ACEs Connection, or, the groups that you facilitate. And maybe a resource page somewhere, how to connect with the information if you want to do self-study.
Okay, so I see that as that's a sweet little commitment that you do, I do think you'd have a lot of influence. You do have a web page. People therefore would go to you because I think they associate trauma-informed practice with mental health, mental wellness. So I think that's a really nice suggestion on Betsy's part, and that is an easy thing for you to do. Down the road, maybe you do something as much as articulating, sharing standards of what folks could learn. So that kind of ties into some of your other things around articulating best practices or standards, and maybe it's best practice, right? So I think that was a big topic on the other page, the main Jamboard, about there may be a role for you as a trauma-informed organization, entity, in helping make sure things are getting done. And I don't mean that overtly, but just that's part of the learning process and the reflection process. How are we doing? And in the process as a board, you might get data on how are our providers doing, right? How are our people doing? Are they getting better? When the people tell you, no, I'm suffering, or I'm not getting the help I need when I need it, or it's never coming at all, then that stuff you guys can help support organizational leaders to understand and do something about. So there's a connection there. Yeah. Anybody so I think everybody, Bob, did you have a comment, or go ahead, whatever you want to say.
Can we specify in the part that's in parentheses that anyone working with mental health community should be informed?
Yes, very good.
one of the ways that we perhaps could do that is, I know, Kathy, at the beginning of each meeting, you have to say who we are and what we do. Maybe we could include a statement that says that we are attempting to be trauma-informed in everything that we do, like we are hopefully supporting cultural equity and anti-racism. So it could be a statement at the beginning, or it could be maybe a link on our agenda at the bottom of the page, below the agenda. It could just be we are intending to be trauma-informed. Here is where you can learn about that, and give a link or something.
And Carol, I'd add to that, and here's where you can let us know how we're doing, or make a suggestion to us about, right? So great. And I think, very good. It is. And I think being open about where you are on this journey is really important. Show your weakness, your vulnerability, your willingness to learn, your transparency, model that, which is, we're beginning a journey. It's going to take us a while. And honestly, in the mental health world, it's particularly not challenging, but complicated, sophisticated. So you're going to proceed carefully, but with good intention, right? So, here we've got 9 minutes left. So let me make sure, I hope I didn't make an assumption and drag one too soon, but you guys have committed to articulating somehow your principles or best practice of trauma and support for services, so that's something you can use to support them to move or be in that space of being trauma informed. I think that ties closely with your commitment to playing an appropriate role to encourage or support organizational leaders to have training around trauma-informed work for anyone working in the organizations or anyone in the mental health community. You're committed to keeping the BOS informed. You are committed to building a network where you can and when. And then you have a commitment to the concept of supporting learning circles, and you're going to figure out what that is. You don't have to commit today exactly what that looks like, but you did articulate a few qualifiers or little mini goals along the way that I've included there. And again, we'll have the notes from the Jamboard as well. And then finally, you're going to use trauma-informed principles in your board communication. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 very strong, practical, detailed commitments for what you can do to be more trauma informed. Any comments on those? Any second thoughts about them? So let me ask you this. Let's move right into, do you all at this point, and you may want to have a more formal process, Kathy, back at your full meeting, out of the retreat environment, whatever you want to do, but is everybody feeling pretty good about these 6?
Yes.
Thumbs up? You guys
Yes.
did an amazing amount of work. Okay, now let's talk about next steps. So what I would recommend is that you now take these things back and actualize them and figure out what that looks like. And you might develop a schedule for how you want to do that. So you might have like 2, I know you have business at your board meetings, so you might have like at each board meeting, maybe you start fleshing out 1, right? You can do 1 at each board meeting on top of your other work, or create another retreat environment if you need to. I would still do it collectively, frankly, as a group. And then that'll raise questions for you that you want to answer, like, what do we mean by trauma informed? So I gave you those 1-pagers, but you have a lot of talent and experience already on the board. I know Becky and Carol both have a deep knowledge, and I suspect others do as well, that you can rely on to articulate that. So for example, use trauma-informed principles in board communication. You guys need to decide which principles are we going to communicate to the board with. So you can rely on the 4 R's, like Becky said, and be considering those principles at the top of that fact sheet or principle sheet that I gave you, and just keep it simple. Keep it simple for yourself. So the next step is to go back and start creating a mini plan for each one of these on what you're going to do, bang out the language, think about, we can't do this, our people need to do this, or we want to put this on hold, but you are the policy board, so you have a role identifying for yourselves how you want to administer or follow through with these commitments. As you articulate that, you may get into, here's what we think we should do, but we want to test that now with somebody. And you may want to take it to the community to get input. Okay? So that's, you go ahead. I'll end it. Oops, oh, hold on. I'm on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was getting a reverb. Sorry, I was getting a reverb. So that's, I think you've done a lot of work. You could write these up and share it with people that we're committed to this and what your next step is going to be, which would be a great transparency practice. You could allow people to comment on those, since it is a Saturday and the community public wasn't here. You could draft those in a coherent way and share it and allow people to comment. So I'm sure you'll come up with something creative. I'm around if you want help. If we do get this Network of Care grant, which we hope to know Monday, then I'm going to be very active and busy in Sonoma County. But if we don't get it, I have more time too, and I'm around if you want more help. And I'm always happy to answer individual questions or connect with you guys to follow up if you wanted to chat. Okay. So any other thoughts?
Can I ask
Go
one
ahead.
question?
Please.
So you gave us these one pagers, and I think that if we are going to talk about trauma-informed care, or trauma-informed practice, that are these the one pagers, the information on them, something that we can use? Like,
yes.
If we said,
So I spent.
if we just simply
Yes, Kathy, I spent.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I spent a little time on those because I wanted you to have things that come right from best practices and that are also more common in the field, as well as just some of the things that I have. It's a biased set of information. It's got the Sarah Rock spin on it based on what I've learned in the trauma and ACEs world. There is a tremendous amount of other stuff. Other people, Carol and Becky, for example, may have other things that I did not include that are high level points they want you to consider, right? But I was thinking about your role, being familiar with that governmental role, as well as mental health field, as well as what I know about ACEs and trauma and Sonoma County, and kind of cold things down to those two sheets. That makes sense? So yes, you can use it.
Okay, so yes, we can use it. And if it ended up in our statement that we like read at the beginning of the board meeting, whatever we decide to do, that it's not a problem to use what you said.
That's right. And then what I would do, I'm going to try so you can see me. Hopefully my thing doesn't hang up. So I used exact wording. So what I would do on self-healing is acknowledge Laura Porter, if you would. And, I'd acknowledge SAMHSA. I actually should have put references on there. I normally do. Sorry, I was rushing on those. So the top section under, there was principles in the 4 R's, that's SAMHSA. And then the self-healing community section, Laura Porter. Where I added language, I used brackets that deviated from the quotation or the way they articulate it. So yeah, okay. That would be a nice thing to do, to acknowledge Laura. Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the work you're doing. I obviously believe in it personally and professionally. It's critical, and I admire your commitment to the authenticity and honesty. So thanks so much, and keep it up. Let me know if I can help. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye,
Thanks to
everybody.
everyone else.